We're going to go ahead and call the meeting of the Bloomington City Council to order. If everyone would please stand for a pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll? Thanks.
Alderman Mathey?
Here.
Alderman Sage?
Here.
Alderman Mwambe?
Here.
Alderman Burgess?
Here.
Alderman Painter?
Here.
Alderman Schmidt?
Here.
Alderman Black?
Here.
Alderman Howman?
Here.
Alderman Bray?
Here.
Mayor Renner.
Here. Thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and move to recognitions and appointments. And we have presentation, actually, Bloomington firefighters who've completed a one-year probation period. And just as a note, for the first of the candidates, Brandon Vaughn, we will take care of his ceremony, or have a ceremony for him on the 22nd of April. But if everyone will come on behind us, as I had said to the chief beforehand, I said, you guys look so good. You make us look really, really good up here. So please, will all our firefighters come on behind us here for pictures, photo op, as well as to recognize one of your own who's coming aboard officially today.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council.
I'm going to turn it over to you, Chief, and then our distinguished clerk, who will administer the oath.
Thank you. Tonight, I'm honored to present the two individuals with me tonight that have completed their one-year probationary period. We have Joseph Wilkinson. Would you please step forward? Joe was born in Bloomington to Brian and Jane Wilkinson. He has a younger sister, Mary Duran, and a younger brother, Lou. He is married to his wife, Becky Wilkinson, and they have a 7-month-old baby boy named Harrison Emery. Joe has been a resident of McLean County area for the vast majority of his life, with a few exceptions that took him away from here for work. He has served 6 years in the Illinois Army National Guard as a medic. Joe and his wife recently purchased a home in Normal and are looking forward to raising their family in the area. So, welcome, Joe. And Joe's family is here with him tonight. Would you please stand up and raise your hand? And next we have Luke Poole. Luke was born and raised in Bloomington, Illinois. His parents are David and Nancy Poole. He attended Bloomington High School, where he completed the fire science course through the Bloomington Area Career Center. After graduating, he attended ISU, majoring in safety, and completed his EMT basic and paramedic classes through McLean County EMS. Luke has worked at Bloomington Township Fire Department for the past 5 years as a firefighter-paramedic. On his days off, he enjoys playing basketball, baseball, and doing anything that has to do with the outdoors. Luke is also an avid saltwater angler and enjoys cooking, entertaining, and spending time with family and friends. In March of 2018, Luke left ISU to take his lifelong dream job with the Bloomington Fire Department. He is honored to have the privilege to serve and protect the community he grew up in. So. And would Luke's family please raise your hand or stand up? Where do you want them to stand?
You can stand right here and I'll stand in this side.
That's good.
All right, so we'll all say the oath. You'll repeat after me. When we begin, I'll pause and you'll say your first name, or first and last name, sorry. Raise your right hand. I,
Joseph Wilkinson,
having been appointed to the office of firefighter in the city of Bloomington, in the county of McLean aforesaid, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Illinois, and faithfully discharge the duties of the office of firefighter according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
So help me God. Chief, I want to thank you and Luke and Poole for everything. Very, very happy. Thanks so much for serving us. Thank you. Appreciate all your sacrifice. Thanks.
Thank you. God bless you. Congratulations.
Thank you all again. To quote our city councilman, Mr. Sage, at one point he had said, these are the people who go running into our homes as we're running out. And so they certainly deserve our eternal gratitude and respect. So I quoted that pretty close, didn't I? I want to make sure I did it with that. And sometimes knock things down, but what the heck. Okay. We're going to move on next to a proclamation as soon as we have a little bit of quiet here. And I see Eric Veal is already moseying on up here. We have a Kids to Parks Day in the city of Bloomington, Illinois. Okay. Thank you all for coming. Proclamation proclaiming May 20, excuse me, where's Tom? Oh, yeah. Please feel free to come and take whatever pictures you want. Proclaiming May 18th, 2019 as Kids to Parks Day in the city of Bloomington, Illinois, whereas May 18th, 2019 is the 9th Kids to Parks Day, organized and launched by the National Park Trust, held annually on the third Saturday of May, and whereas Kids to Park Day empowers kids and encourages families to get outdoors and visit America's parks, public lands, and waters. And whereas we should encourage children to lead a more active lifestyle to combat issues of childhood obesity, diabetes, hypertension, hypercholesterolemia. I apologize. I'm sure I butchered that. And whereas Kids to Park Day will broaden children's appreciation for nature and outdoors, now therefore I, Terry Renner, do hereby proclaim May 18th as Kids to Park Day on this date, 4/8/2019. Thank you so much, and thank you for all you do for our community. Appreciate that. Eric, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And next we have proclamation of National Library Week, and I believe we have our distinguished Director of the Library and Library Board Chair here to jointly come forward. Come on down. The price might not be right, but at least I've got a proclamation for you. Okay. So, proclamation, and this one's long, got a lot of whereases. But it's National Library Week, April 7th through the 13th. So April 7th started yesterday. So this is our first business day, just so that everyone knows for the record. Whereas National Library Week is a national observance sponsored by the American Library Association and libraries across the United States since 1958, and whereas the initial goals of the National Book Committee in 1954 were to encourage people to read in order to improve incomes and health and develop stronger and happier family ties, whereas libraries have long served as trusted, treasured institutions, and library workers and librarians fuel efforts to better their communities, campuses, and schools. And whereas libraries and librarians look beyond their traditional roles and provide transformative opportunities for education, employment, and entrepreneurship, empowerment, engagement, as well as new services that connect closely with patrons' needs. And whereas libraries and librarians open up a world of possibilities through innovative STEAM programming, maker spaces, job-seeking resources, and the power of reading. And whereas librarians are trained, tech-savvy professionals providing technology, training, and access to downloadable content like ebooks, you wouldn't have had this 20-some years ago, right? And whereas National Library Week will be observed Sunday, April 7th through Saturday, April 13th, 2019, with the theme Libraries Equal Strong Communities. And now, therefore, I, Terry Renner, Mayor of the City of Bloomington, do hereby proclaim April 7th through the 13th, 2019 as National Library Week in Bloomington, and I encourage all residents to visit the Bloomington Public Library and to take advantage of the wonderful library resources that are available there. And I thank you both for your service and all that you've done, and congratulations. Thank you. Thank you very much. And just as a side note, obviously our Mayor Pro Tem is also a librarian, and so we thank all of you, and it's a profession. Okay, at this point we move toward public comment, and just to clarify, if you are interested in dialogue or getting quick answers, you can always come to the Mayor's Open House, which is Friday before a regular City Council meeting from 4:30 to 5:30 on Friday evenings before the regular Monday council meeting, and then we can engage in dialogue. You can ask questions about something that's on the agenda or not on the agenda. It's an opportunity to talk to your elected officials. We had some recently candidates as well as elected aldermen who have shown up to our recent meetings, as well as sometimes a city manager or others to answer questions. So that's where you get questions answered. If you want to basically let your opinions be known, that's what public comment's about. So you have each person has up to 3 minutes in public comment, and we have 3 people who have filled out cards, and I'm going to read them in the order in which they were passed to me: Scott Steinley, Donna Boland, and Dale Nafsinger. So let's see. We start out with Scott, who's in the front row, and then Donna, and then Dale. You're all strategically poised, so if you'll come forward. Thank you.
Yes, I will. I've noticed that the streets in this town are not being addressed. That it's amazing to me that the 4-cent motor fuel tax that was passed some time ago was just spent other ways. If that's the case, then say it's the case. Why are the streets just going they're crumbling under our eyes? Right out in front of my house, I probably picked up, I'd say 5 or 6 pieces of street that's just there in the way. And, you know, when these big rains come, it is really, I've told the city that they need to put another 4-inch drain beside that, because that 4-inch drain cannot handle all that water, Terry. And, you know, I've seen people that cars try to get through there and they turn around because the road's flooded. Thankfully, the last time, I was in my house when it started raining, or I couldn't have gotten in the drive. It was that bad. It was over the approach, over the sidewalk, and halfway up my drive. And, you know, maybe somebody's going to have to really hurt themselves before anything's done. You know, I think that the people of this city have had plenty of patience. And I think the city is really taking the money and blowing it. And they're not, so they raised double the motor fuel tax. So it's going to happen if Normal doesn't do it. They're going to go to Normal. If Normal does it, they may go outside McLean County or outside Bloomington Normal. Say they're going within a very short distance of a city that doesn't have that, and they're going to go there, Terry, and you're going to lose everything. You're going to lose the 19 cents the state has. You're going to lose the, I believe, 35 cents the federal has. You're going to lose the 8 cents the city has, and you'll still be out of money. You'll never be satisfied. You can tax as high as you want to tax, and you'll never be satisfied, Terry. Maybe you should change the sign to read, "Welcome to Bloomington, home of the potholes."
Thank you. We go next to Donna Boland.
I'm Donna Boland. I live in Ward 2, and I'm going to be talking about the item on the agenda 8C. When I was at the WGLT forum, we were asked whether we supported the gas tax increase, and I said I did not, and the reason is that the motor fuel tax can be used for things other than street resurfacing and sidewalks. So I'd like to share, in the spirit of transparency, what the tax can be used on. Street lighting systems, storm sewers, signs. They can be used for matching grants, which I don't particularly mind. Can be used for retirement of debt. It can be used for local mass transit, payment of principal and interest for road bonds. And although the statute doesn't specifically say this, it can be used for salt storage facilities, wages and salaries, holidays, vacation and sick leave, workers' compensation, insurance premiums, retirement funds, Social Security fund, health, hospitalization, life insurance, tree trimming, and removal. So, and this is found on the Illinois State website for the use of motor fuel tax, and that's just part of the list. So I want to make sure that the motor fuel tax is used for street and sidewalk repair. We have a history of diverting the funds, and I just want to make sure they're used as promised. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Dale Nassinger.
Hello, everybody. I came 2 weeks ago to talk about taxes and things, and I was frustrated. Got here at 4 minutes till the hour. I found there's a new 5-minute rule. And citizens put a lot of effort, if they get here, to try and do this. And I know you need rules, but I asked to speak. No, we can't do that. We can't make exceptions. I was here a couple years ago when the meeting didn't start on time. And it was held until somebody came in and presented a slip. And I was really angry last week when I came to talk, and I couldn't talk, but other people we hold the meetings for. Getting on, I don't care about the 4-cent tax. I care about the tax. There's just always another tax. When I was a kid, I've lived in Bloomington my entire life. Everything was paid for. And it seemed like every time we turn around, we fought for years over garbage tax. And now we're paying this big tax and we're cutting the services. It used to be included. The street repair used to be included. Oh, now we have a motor fuel tax. 4 years ago I was here. Mr. Black said, I don't think people mind paying a few cents more. And where'd that money go? Another person said, we voted for more services in California. I think people want it. I have a friend from Russia, and she says she pays 12% income tax. Nothing else hardly. She says, what do you do with all the money over here? There's taxes and fees for everything. I have a budget. When I run out, I'm done. That's it. But government, everywhere you go, they grab more and more. All of you have budgets. Everybody out here has a budget. And everything, most things in government are percentages. When costs go up, taxes go up. But we don't do that. We keep grabbing more and more and more. You want to double the city gas tax. The state wants to double it. The federal government wants to raise it. When are we going to stop? When we're just completely out of money? We're taking more money from businesses. Oh, the evil businesses. Every time you tax a business, they tax their customers. So you're taxing the citizens every time you put a new tax in. You got to find a way to stop this. Everybody else does, or they get in trouble. But government just takes more and more and more. You say the new tax should only be used for infrastructure and certain things. Well, let's say we build the new soccer field, which I hope we don't ever talk about that again. Technically, that would be infrastructure, wouldn't it? Why are sidewalks part of the taxes, part of this? Streets, gas taxes, cars, should be streets. We have to address this. I've never seen such a mess. Our roads, it's just terrible. I go elsewhere, and it's not like this. We have to address it. We have to stop raising taxes. I don't care what you cut. I have to. Everybody here has to. And you guys got to stop it. Pensions. If we don't fix pensions, we might as well close the door and turn off the lights. You say you can't fix it. Well, then what are we going to do? We have to stop these things. We have to find a way to address it and make it work before we're all done. Because I think it's just terrible what's going on. And my time's up, and thank you. But you have to find a way to address this. The state of Illinois was a 0.5% tax when I was a kid. Now it's 5%. They can't pay their bills. No matter how much they get, they're broke. I'm
Thank
done.
you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, we move along to our consent agenda. Are there items on the consent agenda that are normally considered to be routine that any member of the City Council would like to have pulled from the consent agenda? Alderwoman Howman.
I'm guessing I should pull item C.
Item C. Oh,
Just saying.
you think there might be a conflict? Okay. Alderwoman Bray.
I'd like to pull item L.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented with the exceptions of items C and L?
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Alderwoman Painter. Is there a second?
So moved.
Second by Alderwoman Howman. Any further discussion? And if you can go ahead and start voting. Thank you. All right. The motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. We will move right along to, and I think I know the reason why, just call me crazy. We'll let you know when we vote on this and how close it was. So Alderwoman Howman was recusing herself because item 7C is an appointment to the Regional Planning Commission of at that point, she will be former Alderwoman Howman. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Black. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Bray. Any further discussion? Seeing none, if everyone will go ahead and vote. Motion carries 8-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. We can ask Alderwoman Howman to come back in and tell her barely made it. Close one, and I had to break the tie. No. Right. Next is item L, consideration of approval of the First Amendment rules of public safety, and let's see, Alderwoman Bray pulled that. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'd just like to pause a moment as I see this item is in relation to our Public Safety and Community Relations Board. And just wanted to pause a moment and thank those folks that serve on that board. And I'll also ask a question. I'm just wondering, the proposal here is to denote a liaison to the City Council. And just wanted to check in and see, are there any pain points that are in relation to that, or was this just considered to be a cleanup item or kind of an enhancement? City Manager.
Thank you. Nora, did you want to comment to that? Nora, our communication manager and liaison, is the one that prepared this consent item. Nora?
Thank you, and Chairman Taylor is here as well. He chairs that committee. I don't believe there were any pain points. It simply is that board wanting to have more of a presence here at council and report back to the rest of the board on council activities.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. And I'd like to make a motion then that we pass item L as presented.
Thank you, Alderwoman Bray. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Painter. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, if everyone will go ahead and vote. Motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. We move right along then to our regular agenda, and our first regular agenda item is, of course, adoption of the fiscal year 2020 budget appropriations ordinance, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to our city manager and our finance director, and then a city council discussion.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Scott, if you would come up to the podium, I've just got a couple of quick comments. This process, the FY20 process, feel that it was a strong internal process, enjoyed the interaction with the elected officials, hoping the community sees the transparency in the repeated messaging on, arguably the most important thing that we do as an elected body and as staff. We're at the final point where we're at the finish line, if you will. Scott's going to walk us through much of the information we've already seen, but there is a couple of changes regarding the approval of the additional 4 cents on the local motor fuel tax. So there's an adjustment in the budget, and then also the terminal fee, the annual terminal fee for the video gaming terminals. I'll turn it over to you, Scott.
Thank you. As Tim mentioned, this presentation is going to be pretty much an exact mirror image of the proposed presentation. We're going to spend a lot of time, not a lot of time, but I'm going to spend some time talking about the delta between the proposed and the adopted, where those increases came from. But we're going to start with the highlights as we do the last few times. Citywide, 227.5. That's a sizable increase over the prior year, 17.4 million. Like to direct your attention down to the capital projects. You can see that 13.5 of that is related to capital projects. There's the local motor fuel tax. It has an added transfer grossing up of the budget. That accounts for the difference there. I wanted to comment that motor fuel tax is a fund, the state motor fuel tax dollars. We accumulate those balances year to year. Those dollars are used for large projects. The local motor fuel tax, those are the dollars we target to spend every year. Motor fuel tax fund, $14 million in capital projects targeted for the coming year. So those balances have been accumulating over time. We get about $1.8 million from state motor fuel tax. We apply for grants and things of that nature. The water fund, same story, accumulating funds over time. $10.5 million in water-related projects for the coming year. I'd like to direct your attention to the general fund balance. Even with the approval of the $600,000 for the Miller Park concession stand, we're still projecting a $20 million ending fund balance for 2020. So that's a very respectable fund balance, so happy with that. The changes. When we did the proposed budget, we had a citywide total of $221.6 million. For the adopted, $227.5. As you can see on the screen, that's a $5.9 million increase. I've laid out the itemized detail of where those changes came from by fund. So you can see the general fund, we moved the utility billing department in. I've commented on that. We had the local motor fuel tax increase. All the large taxes are deposited into the general fund, and then they're transferred to the capital improvement fund for local motor fuel tax and the quarter point on sales tax. On tonight's agenda, we have a new fund dedicated solely to asphalt and concrete. We have the $125,000 video gaming fee increase transferred to the capital improvement fund. Placeholder for public safety building projects. Capital Improvement Fund, A and C. So we have the revenues come into the general fund, then they're transferred over to the asphalt and concrete fund. So in a way, from an accounting standpoint, it's almost like a duplication of the revenue. So that's why we have a $4.6 million effect on the citywide budget just related to the local motor fuel tax increase. So of the 5.9, 4.6 related to the local motor fuel tax increase, $250,000 related to the gaming increase. And then, as I mentioned before, we had a project for the police roof repair. It was budgeted for 2019, not going to happen, so we're rolling that to 2020. Funds were already set aside in 2019. No additional funds needed, but it's going to gross up the 2020 budget. Grants. Some grants were added by Jennifer that were not included in the proposed, $378,000. And then the water fund, you can see that it's minus $485,000. Well, that's primarily related to the utility billing department. There's a big component that went to the general fund. It's not only personnel, but it's all the printing costs, all the bank fees, credit card fees, all those kinds of things came out of water, went to the general fund. It's not a one-for-one right there because some of that expense is sticking with the water fund. In prior years, we used to allocate it out, so it's not like it all came out. And then just miscellaneous adjustments of $46,000. Just direct your attention, this is the major tax revenue summary from before. Local motor fuel tax obviously went from 2.3 to 4.6, a sizable increase there. And then we were reviewing trends, the budget manager and myself. So looking at the state sales tax, it looked like the trend for this year and taking that into next year was coming under a little bit. So we lowered state sales tax by $200,000, but the local use tax is coming in very strong, so we increased that by $250,000. So just a net increase of $50,000 there. along with the increase for the local motor fuel tax of the 2.3. General fund, just to highlight the significant changes from proposed, obviously the taxes, the tax line went up by 2.3 million, local motor fuel tax. Licenses went up by 125,000, the video gaming terminal fee, and then the transfers in on the bottom line there, you can see it says for utility billing, so that is the charges from the enterprise fund transferring in to the general fund. Expenses. Salaries, they went up related to the utility billing coming into the general fund. Contractuals and commodities, they went up significantly related to the billing department coming into the general fund. Contractuals went up by 400,000. Commodities went up by 100,000. Supplies, the mailings, the contractuals are primarily related to the printing costs for that function. Citywide here, just the majority of the change here is related to the local motor fuel tax. Taxes went up, and then the transfer in went up as well. Capital improvement, asphalt and concrete fund has the transfers coming into it, so that grosses the entire budget up. Expenses, increase in capital projects related to the capital improvement, or excuse me, to the local motor fuel tax. And then the flip side of the transfers in, transfers out, general fund, I know you guys are like, rinse, repeat, right? Tax dollars come into the general fund, they transfer out, so that's going to gross up our transfer out activity, and then that's transferred into the capital improvement, asphalt, and concrete funds. So a little bit of the behind-the-scenes accounting lesson here. Apologies for that. Capital projects, just going to highlight the changes real briefly here. You can see that we put a placeholder in, second line, $125,000 for video gaming terminal funded projects. I don't want to skip the facilities, police roof repair, $400,000 addition for 2020, just rolled from 2019. And then capital improvement, asphalt and concrete fund. Of the 2.3 additional that's coming in this year, Tim, did you want to speak to this, the 800,000?
Yeah, real quick on the passage of the additional 4 cents on the local motor fuel tax. How's that going to look in terms of projects for construction season 2019, this one that's approaching? So that tax goes into effect on May 1st. We average about a $200,000 collection of the entire 4 cents per month. And rather than doing an additional $2.3 million worth of work this construction season, we won't have the funds collected, over the course of an entire year. But what the plan is we will collect May, June, July, and August, which would be a collection of about $750,000, $800,000, and still fill time to let an additional project to do some local motor fuel tax, the new 4 cents, yet this construction season. And then as we roll into construction season 20, we will use the full $2.3 million on top of the original 4 cents and the 0.25% on the home roll sales tax. Just wanted to give a quick update on how that is actually being spent this year. I know that there's some eagerness to use some of that money this year, and we think that we have an opportunity with a later in the construction season letting of projects. Again, it will be about $750,000 to $800,000 collected by that time, and that's the amount of work that we do for this season.
Can you can clarify for us that this is limited, not just, it's limited by ordinance as well as by the state of Illinois, what we can use this money for?
That is true, and we'll speak to that additionally under C.
Right.
But this council's made it very clear that this is to be for asphalt and concrete, not just the new 4 cents, but the original 4 cents that was passed in 2014 and the 0.25% home rule sales tax. So that entire amount will be used for the, again, asphalt and concrete.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Questions from the council?
I got some more.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were done. Okay.
I can bow out. That's okay. No. No changes, material changes to the rest of the projects. This is very difficult to see, but in a way, this is the total of the budget you're adopting. I mean, this shows the total budgets for each of our 29 funds. Believe it or not, we have 29 funds now. General fund at the top, that's 109 million. If you look all the way down at the bottom of the kind of highlighted columns, you can see the 227,542. That's the total revenue expense budget for citywide. These are all our different funds. If you see some reds, typically those are related to funds where we do advanced funding, like in TIFs, where we put expenditures in before the money comes in or the dollars start flowing in related to property tax, so we may have some negative fund balance. It's the same is true related to the grants. I did want to just highlight, if you look at capital projects, that section there, there's a new fund, capital improvement, asphalt and concrete. You can see it's blank. There was no ending fund balance for 2018. But what I really wanted to highlight was our ending fund balance for 2020 is 1.6 million. So that's the 1.5 that's kind of going unspent because we're targeting $800,000 to spend during this construction season over the next few months. The rest will accumulate in a fund balance dedicated, strictly for streets and sidewalks, and will remain transparent in that fund to be utilized in 2020 along with, the funds that will come in that year, or 2021, I guess. 2020 construction season, but 2021 budget. So I wanted to highlight that. And then just, kind of a recap, summary of highlights. Passed the local motor fuel tax. There's an $800,000 we were just speaking of. Creation of the capital improvement and asphalt and concrete fund. That's still to be voted on. So video gaming terminal, 1.9 million cash for equipment. Recall the focus of try to trend away from using the capital equipment lease to save the city the interest expense. Interest rates are rising. Just really kind of want to start weaning ourselves off that funding source. The internalization of the economic development dollars. Creation of the economic development department. And then the water reorg. Don't want to lose sight of that. 250,000 roughly savings from the public water public works reorganization. And that concludes my presentation. This will be posted on the website tomorrow at that address. And any other questions?
Okay, now questions. I'll get it right. Comments? Concerns? Alderman Black.
Thank you, and thank you, Scott. Just a couple of thoughts here. Right out the gate, I appreciate this budget cycle and the way that it's worked out. I've seen a number of iterations of this over the years, and thinking about the high-level projects is very helpful, and the high-level budget units also assist me as well in making decisions about how we fund some of our projects. Right off the top of my head here, we say this every year, but I'm hoping this will be the year that we actually do it, is that we're coming out of a budget cycle, and there's a lot of fresh thoughts that we have for next year. And I'm thinking that in the next few months, we start to seriously talk about a couple of things. Number one, a conversation that came up recently was about what the city's bond rating should be. Do we want to look at a AAA bond rating? What would that entail? For me specifically, I'm interested in seeing what a reserve policy would look like if we use those reserves as a down payment towards a capital project, as an influx in cash in streets, sewers, and sidewalks, whatever that might be. But I need to have a better understanding what the policy, the implications of that policy might be. Number two is I know that we have a lot of feedback often about the way the budget process works, and I think what I've seen us move towards over the last few years that has been very successful is that we map out the budget process very early on in the winter time frame, and then we just work the process to completion, which is now in April. I would suggest that my colleagues, Jamie, you've made some comments. I've also made some comments about some tweaks for next year that we build that in. Maybe in the fall time frame, we talk a little bit about what we want to see out of a budget process with transparency, public engagement, and making sure that everybody's comfortable with how we're proceeding. And finally, when it comes to the projects that are coming up with the new local motor fuel tax or anything under the concrete and asphalt fund, I would like, and I don't know if this is even possible, to see maybe a menu of projects that the council can select from. Maybe we make some policy decisions based on how we spend that money. A lot of times I think some of the frustration that I hear from the public is that they feel disconnected to the selection process of those projects. And if we look at a couple different ones and we make a decision, then we're standing by that. And so I don't know how much work that'd be on Jim and his staff to put together, but even just a high-level ballpark of a handful of projects, I think would be interesting to see, and we can put that to a vote.
And related to that, we also have the Transportation Advisory Committee, and I believe Alderwoman Schmidt talked about that, reinvigorating that group that already exists,
Yes.
which would be direct citizen input as well as council input on what roads and what in the timetable, et cetera,
Yeah.
need to be fixed.
The more voices, the better, is always my opinion.
Other comments? Alderman Matthey.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott, and thanks, Tim. I've talked to you about this before, but just before we come back to just building off of budget stuff for next year, is I would like to see a fully fleshed, a conversation about the how we're going to address the pensions. I know I've talked to you about that. The last presentation that I could find that council had about this, I think, was from 2015. And I would just like to know, now that we're 5 years in from when it was voted on in 2014, where we've gotten to and what the forecast looks like going forward, because I think that's going to affect everything we talk about for budget. So, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, I would love a motion. Oh, so are you making a motion?
Yes, I move that we...
You're offering to dance and then say, oh, no, thanks.
Sorry. I move that we adopted fiscal year 2020 budget and appropriation ordinance.
Okay, is there a second to the motion to adopt the 2020 budget ordinance?
Second.
Second by Alderman Black. Any further discussion? Alderman Sage.
Yeah, thanks. And I just wanted to echo and say thanks, Tim and Scott, and I know your whole finance department. And so I say this some years during budget votes, but I maybe haven't said it for a couple of years. But so we've had a debate about these taxes, and we voted those up or down, and that's the way the process should work. And so in a minute, I'll vote for the budget because what sometimes people don't understand, particularly folks who don't watch a lot of city council proceedings, right, is that we have a legal fiduciary responsibility to pass a budget. I mean, that's incumbent on us to do that. And so while I will vote for the budget here in a minute, again, it's not a budget that I would have preferred, but we had staff presentations, we had council conversations, and we voted, and that's the way it should work. So again, thanks, gentlemen, and to your teams, because the process did work well.
Thank you for bringing out that point, Alderman Sage. Alderman Milwaukee.
Thank you. And same here. I'd like to, thank you guys for the great work that you've done. I think this year it felt less painful than others. So it's been very good to go through that process. One of the things that I wanted to mention, and I don't know how we get around that, but I did sense, where there were some points of pain was in trying to kind of recollect, about, some of the events that happened and why money was spent one way or another. So I think to that extent, I don't know if we need to have a budget historian or something like that, that. But and I'm especially thinking about this because we're at a point where we're going to have some changeover in the council. 20 years or 30 years from now, none of us will be here, and people will be asking themselves, the same question. Why did we make the decision that we made, 10, 15 years ago? So I think that's something that we should definitely explore and try to overcome. And the same as Alderman Sage said, I did vote against the local motor fuel tax, but we're at a point now that we have to pass a budget, and I'll be voting for the budget. And in a way, it's also a vote of confidence, in the work that you've done, and also to increase transparency in what we do, and that's why I'm encouraged to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Again, and thank you for bringing up that point. Again, budgets are often not something that any individual would want or would put together on their own, but do come together through a budget process where we have collective input by 9 members of City Council, the mayor, plus obviously the proposals that staff put forward. Any other comments, questions? Okay, if we will vote, we do have a motion on the floor on the budget as presented. The budget passes 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. And thank you again, Scott, for all your work. Thank you, Mr. Gleason. Thank you for the rest of the staff for all your work on this. We move next to the ratification of a contract with IATSE Local 193, as recommended by the Human Resources and Parks and Recreation Cultural Arts Department. And I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Gleason.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a continuation of the practice. This will be the second time we've brought a labor contract in front of council. Let me say that again. They always come in front of council, but they typically come on the consent agenda. We've carved those out. We're going to have those on the regular agenda going forward. And just a quick walkthrough where we see this negotiation as a win-win. IATSE are our stage hands that we have at the BCPA. They're all part-time employees. They do not receive like the sick leave buyback benefits. That council has been very clear, in negotiations to address those by ordinance last fall. But this contract is a 3-year contract, was settled in one session, and if approved, well, it's been ratified, but if approved by council, May 1st of this year, a 2% pay raise goes into effect. 5/1 of 20, a 2% pay raise goes into effect. And on the third year of 5/1 of 21, a 2.25% pay raise goes into effect. Relatively small budget for the city of Bloomington, less than $250,000. But again, wanted to walk through this very quickly with council. Thank you.
Okay. Comments? Excuse me. Comments, questions, council members? Motion.
I'll make a motion we approve this as presented to us.
Okay. Moved by Alderwoman Schmidt. Is there a second? Couple seconds there. Second by Alderwoman Howman. Any further discussion? If we'll go ahead and vote on this contract. The motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. And we move right along to item 8C, consideration of an ordinance establishing a separate fund within the city budget to track revenues and expenses, same as expenditures, of course, related to the maintenance and repair of city streets and sidewalks, titled the Capital Improvement Asphalt and Concrete Fund. And this is as requested by the Finance and Administration Departments. And the recommendation staff that this ordinance be approved. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Mr. Gleason.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. There might be additional questions or comments, but as you see the ordinance that's being proposed currently at the local level in our ordinance, we're more restrictive than what was cited previously, state statute. And what this is at the direction of City Council. And actually, let me say this. Had a media question about this item, and it was a good question. But is this being put in place to add additional security to protect the asphalt and concrete funds, the entire now 8 cents and the 1/4% on the home rule sales tax? And the answer to that was no. It was always protected under the capital improvements line item. This is more about transparency. This is an opportunity to carve out, separate, and very clearly, when we're talking about asphalt and concrete projects, it will, if passed, will now include the entire 8 cents, the 1/4% on the home rule sales tax, and can easily be tracked in the budget. So just carving it out, no extra level of security, it's an extra level of transparency.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments by members of the council? Yes, Alderwoman Howman.
Thanks. Okay, so I have to hear things a couple times sometimes. So the 4 cents we have in place, the 4 cents we just voted on 2 weeks ago, and the 1/4 penny sales tax, asphalt and concrete, what do we, where will money come for things like streetlights and other items that, as soon-to-be Alderman Bolin mentioned? I mean, I've seen that list. It's pretty extensive, and I know we don't pay for salaries and vacations and things like that out of ours, but where will the money come from for some of the other items that are related to streets and sidewalks?
Those are part of the larger budget. This will be, we've estimated $5 million now, 2.3 on the original 4 cents, 2.3 additionally is what we're projecting, and then about an equal amount out of the 1/4% home rule sales tax truly will just be used for the asphalt and concrete projects. The other needs of Public Works will come out of the capital improvement fund that we have, and will pay for some of those additional items. That's another thing, and it's a good point that maybe we should remind, again, at the direction of council. We're taking an extra step in messaging so that the community, anybody in the community, can track the revenues in on the locomotive fuel tax, the entire 8 cents, and then also the 1/4% on the home rule sales tax, and then we will also show the expenses out. And that's not just going to be on our website, but Deputy City Manager Tyus has already secured bloomingtonstreets.org as a site that anybody can go to and see exactly where the money's going. Okay. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to hear it in public, because I know that there are a lot of questions and concerns, and I mean, I'm confident that we've been spending it as it should be, but there, again, there are a number of other items that tax could be spent on, and I just want to make sure that people understand what we're using it for. Thanks.
Okay. Alderwoman Schmidt and then Bray.
Just want to drill down a little bit deeper into Diana's question, potholes. Are potholes asphalt and concrete, or are potholes something else?
Jim, yes or no? Give me a thumbs up. Are potholes in this? Yes.
So when we hear all the complaints about potholes being filled and how quickly we do it, this is the fund that is going to help us move ahead on those.
Come on up.
Come on down.
That's a little question.
Should have come up here anyway, Jim.
Potholes, specifically your second question. The act of filling potholes comes out of our street maintenance budget, which is general fund. This fund, the LMFT, is going for asphalt and concrete, as the city manager and the council has put forth in the past. So that goes toward resurfacing our streets, the concrete. It goes for the hard asphalt and concrete. So it will help potholes. It will address, because the potholes are a symptom of the larger problem of the condition of our streets.
I will just point out that the potholes right now are the things that people are upset about, and seems to be something of a disconnect here. People will say, you're charging us more for gas, my potholes aren't getting fixed, so that's a messaging point.
What we would encourage is that, we really do encourage people to use that My Bloomington app. We do respond, we say within 72 hours. Normally we get it in 24. Thank you.
Yeah, just to, Jim, don't go too far, just in case, man. And just to clarify, if I'm summarizing this correctly, Jim, so the asphalt fund, that is for, in effect, long-term street resurfacing. The short-term fixes of fixing potholes comes out of a different fund.
Right.
Okay, but we are moving aggressively on both. Okay, and so that I think is what Alderwoman, am I misstating? I think that's what you were after.
I think people will conflate having to pay more for gas with why aren't my potholes filled.
Right.
So,
Right.
And we just need to be clear about how we're talking about this on the new website.
Right. And if people don't know how to use apps, if they're not millennials, then we can always call, right? And it's 434 bump. 434 bump. Okay. Just wanted to make sure I had that. Alderwoman Bray and Alderwoman Burgess.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, staff, for putting this together. So before us, we have three versions. We have an original version that was attached to our meeting agenda, and then in reviewing that and getting some commentary from our soon-to-be Alderwoman Bolin, I put together some additional, language that was inserted, and staff took the time to call that the Bray draft alternate. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And in particular, you'll see in the Bray draft alternate, in paragraph 4, the fourth whereas particularly calls out that this is for concrete and asphalt. So this, as made mention, there's just a very specific population that we voted on, frankly, to say that we would collect this particular gas tax and do this kind of work. So it's not for other kinds of things. It's not for historic preservations. It's not for the lighting. It's just that money will have to come from somewhere else. This is just focusing on our main thoroughfares and residential areas that are concrete and asphalt. Would that be correct, City Manager?
Yes.
Yeah. So for that reason,
Minimalism.
So for that reason, I've inserted concrete and asphalt into the fourth whereas paragraph. And so I'll be making a motion that you all adopt my draft alternative. And I don't know, is that time now, or?
It is, if you want it to be.
I'd like to make that motion.
Okay. So you want to make a motion that we pass this as presented with an amendment that if you'd read that amendment again to us, the language.
May I ask a question before the motion goes any further? Would adding, and I'm always a little reluctant to kind of do this stuff on the fly, but would adding the concrete and asphalt phrasing to the staff draft alternate, would that accomplish what you are intending to try and do with your alternate? So if we take...
Yes. Jeff, will it? Yeah. But we just would need to add it to the third paragraph then.
Yeah, so I wanted, so let me just say again, just so that perhaps I haven't misspoken, that what I'm suggesting is that we take that wording, those three words, from your paragraph 4 of your alternate, and add them to the second paragraph, if you will, of the staff draft alternate, and in front of where it says streets and sidewalks in red there, we would add concrete and asphalt. That's what I'm asking and or suggesting. Is that something that would be agreeable with you?
I'm not sure that maintains the full meaning to limit the expenditures. That in that whereas paragraph, it identifies the two sources, but I don't know if it it limits expenditure.
We're going to call Jeff Jurgens up, but also want to make sure that we're following what you're suggesting, Alderman Sage.
So I'll try and see if I can address this. So the second whereas, is that the whereas you're talking about inserting it?
In the staff draft alternate,
In the staff draft alternate,
the second whereas that continues, the city raises revenue
Right.
that in front of streets.
right. So in the staff alternate, we weren't suggesting concrete and asphalt be put there because the actual underlying ordinances that adopted the local home rule gas tax and the sales tax, they weren't that specific. They just said transportation infrastructure projects and street and sidewalks. So I think if you're going that direction, one option would be to leave that whereas, but in that third whereas, after the one that's struck, add concrete and asphalt before street resurfacing program, so that it's more specific there.
Okay.
So I have a question then, if we're looking at staff draft, say that 10 times. Staff proposes striking the third whereas paragraph, which is the expenditure paragraph as I read it, whereas these ordinances state those related revenues are to be used specifically for the street resurfacing program and sidewalk repairs. And so I'm unclear why that limiting paragraph about expenditure was struck from staff draft.
Just because the whereas ahead of that was really kind of reiterating the same thing with these revisions. It says which are to be dedicated to the maintenance of city streets and sidewalks. So, and we can add that back in there. But I don't think it would be accurate in that struck whereas clause to say that those ordinances limited it to asphalt and concrete, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
So if there's a, go ahead.
So then based on that, so Kim, then maybe a follow-up question, just simply taking those three words from your alternate statement, meaning concrete and asphalt, and moving that to what in effect has become the third whereas, following the struck paragraph, and putting it in there where Jeff suggested, so it would read, to increase transparency and specifically track the revenues and projects associated with concrete and asphalt street, with the concrete and asphalt street resurfacing program. Does that add that level of detail or perhaps clarity that you're looking for?
Thank you for asking. My recommendation would be that we add back the third paragraph that's been struck, whereas these ordinance state those related revenues to be used specifically for, because that, to me, that's the limiting paragraph. Because paragraph 1 talks about being home rule. Paragraph 2 talks about two sources where the money's coming from. Paragraph 3 is the limiting expenditure paragraph. Paragraph 4 is the transparency paragraph. That's how I read it. Maybe we should bring it back another time.
It sounds like that's at least one of the suggestions. But let me go ahead and, at this point, before we go forward, one of the options is, of course, to take this, make sure that the language is okay, and that this is consistent with what everybody wants before we move forward. But I'm going to turn to Amelia, and I know I've got you in the pipeline here to come back to you. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. And I would agree at this point, I think with the amount of conversation, I'm not comfortable voting on something that's not written out so I know exactly what I'm voting on. Mm-hmm. So I would prefer, if it's acceptable to everyone, that we put this off. But I do, if we're not going to vote it on this evening, I think we need to be very clear and intentional about our language here and make a conscious decision moving forward, because what I'm concerned about is that we're not having a specific conversation about why some people on council think the language
concrete and asphalt is so important, because as those of us who live in older neighborhoods know, not all streets in our community are made of concrete and asphalt. Not all infrastructure that's related to transportation is quite that limited. So I think we should have a conscious decision and a public conversation about whether or not that is what we intend to do, to specifically say, despite the fact that we have plans in place to deal with infrastructure that is made of things other than asphalt and concrete, that we as a council don't want any of this money going towards funding that program. Or we can say, yes, we do, on a case-by-case basis, want money from these particular sources to go toward that goal. So that we're making a conscious decision and we're not limiting our options, and by our I mean future council's options, with this particular ordinance, keeping in mind, of course, that ordinances can always be changed, because as our legal counsel has pointed out, that is not language that is present in our enacting documents. So we would be making things narrower here than we are necessarily required to do, and we will be limiting the options future councils will have. So if we're going to have that conversation, I think we need to be very intentional about it and make sure that we get plenty of transparency and public input before we make that decision.
Alderman Miller-Wampwe.
Okay. I was going to make a motion that we get a couple aspirins for everybody. I'm going to walk away from the ordinance stuff because it gives me headaches. But I wanted to know, because I'm more of a process person, so I want to know how BloomingtonStreets.com is going to work, when it's going to start, when we're going to see things. Because as Alderwoman Schmidt pointed out, I think this is something that we'll have to deal with, is how are we going to manage expectations. People will still see potholes and they will start asking questions, where's the money going? And I think we've seen emails just this past weekend, about I'm still seeing potholes. What's going to happen? What are you guys going to do with the money? And I think we've heard people mention the same thing. And I also have questions about pavement preservation. Where is that money going to come from? Is it going to come from that same pot of money? Is it in the maintenance program for streets?
Question to me. Or was
is that
that
just a
just
general
comment?
Yeah, it's a general comment. I don't know if Jim is here, if he's hiding or pretending like he didn't hear.
He's still hiding. He ran to the back faster than you could imagine.
Yes. I wanted to know about pavement preservation, and also
Okay.
BloomingtonStreets.com. How it's going to. When are people going to see it?
While we're waiting on Jim, Deputy City Manager Tyus, give us an update on the website.
And before you do that, I also, one thing that I just remembered, we talk about asphalt and concrete, and I think Alderwoman Schmidt alluded to that as well. Sometimes those are technical terms for the average person, and people don't quite get that. What is asphalt? What is concrete? What are you going to do with it? I think that BloomingtonStreets.com should have that explained to people.
Absolutely, Mayor and Alderman. One of the things that we're doing now is actually going through a design stage with Nora, our communications director, and also our IS staff. So we're working on design currently. I would anticipate that you will actually start to see something within the next several weeks, and hopefully they don't get upset with me for saying that. But that would be the plan, barring anything happening unexpectedly. One of the things that we also know is that the funds won't start to actually come in until I believe mid-June, and so we have a little bit of time to start putting together the website. We're doing that now. The thing that we'll be able to do on this site that I'm excited about is, frankly, we talked about being able to show revenues in and expenses out, but we're also able to give news updates as it relates to projects. We're able to give deadlines and timelines as it relates to work starting and stopping. We're also able to talk about things like potholes as part of the narratives that we share. So there may not be a section for potholes, but we'll be able to talk about what they are, how they're filled, what to do in the event that you see them on your streets, and those kinds of things. It's really a communications vehicle for folks. And so we'll be able to use it in a number of different ways. And quite frankly, one of the things that'll happen is that it'll evolve into what this community wants to see it become. And so if we know that we're getting a lot of questions about potholes, we'll know to be able to share a lot of more information about that on this site. I won't answer that.
Okay. Alderman Sage.
Thank you. So, well,
Was he waiting, or were we waiting for Jim?
Oh, we were waiting for Jim. That's right. Jim was supposed to answer Maboka's question. That's right. Pavement preservation.
Pavement preservation is part of our annual process that we do. Typically, we do that in the fall, and so it is one to where we do our asphalt and sidewalk work. We try in the last few years to do that before May 1st so that we can begin the work as soon as we can after the beginning of the fiscal year. Pavement preservation we have tried in the spring. It's been more effective for us in the fall, so we'll bid that later on toward the end of the construction season. We've had better success with that in the past.
And it won't include that nasty stuff that we had, what was that, 5 years ago? We tweaked it. Oh, okay. I had somebody 3 days ago mad at me for that still from 5 years.
I've asked Jeff to come back up and see if some of the language that we're working on just between us, if it might satisfy council.
Yeah, so,
Okay,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think,
Absolutely.
you
Go
okay
ahead,
with that? Because I had recognized. Okay.
yes, thank you.
Yeah, just listening to some of the preliminary comments and feedback. One option might be to utilize the Bray draft alternate, but where we say concrete and asphalt in that fourth whereas, to add and other material in there to address any other type of resurfacing or bricks or whatever else it might be in relation to a street or related repair. So, and again, these are whereas clauses. They're basically just kind of telling the story of why we're doing this. The meat and soul of this is, the fact that this fund will be created, and this is where this money is going to go, again, for, as the city manager said, transparency purposes. You guys all control, how that money is spent. This isn't, giving a blank check to staff to go out and, start spending this money. This is just that extra level of transparency, creating that fund that you guys can all look at, review, and continue to monitor. So just offer that up.
Okay.
Thank you. So I guess if a majority of the aldermen are comfortable with the staff draft alternate as presented, I can be supportive of that because I believe we've had intentional conversations about that. If I have heard the phrase once, I think I've heard it a dozen times, this idea of concrete and asphalt, concrete and related to streets. I think the concern that I had, others had, and maybe from a couple of other aldermen that I happened to talk with, was when we just step outside of that a little bit and we get into words like and other transportation infrastructure, that's where it begins to feel a little bit like a slippery slope. And I know staff has been clear that that's not what they're talking about, that staff is talking about streets, concrete and asphalt streets and or sidewalks. So again, in the interest of trying to move this along, because again, I believe we've had those intentional conversations repeatedly here, and staff hasn't deviated from this notion that it would be concrete and asphalt, and it would be streets and sidewalks. Again, if a majority of the aldermen are supportive of that, I think this helps draw, at least I believe it does, that kind of hard line of demarcation between streets, sidewalks, and then this other more cryptic, mysterious, and other infrastructure projects, whatever those might or might not be. Again, I'll be interested in seeing, and perhaps helping make a motion to adopt the staff draft alternate, and appreciate, staff trying to work through this. So thank you.
Okay. Alderman Black and then Bray.
Yeah. Thank you. And to Alderman Sage's point, I think I've heard concrete and asphalt a number of times, second only to Citizens Convenience Center. So Public Works has the nomenclature down. I'm not a really big fan of these sorts of things. I'm going to vote for it, and my comment was going to be that we'll just revisit this in a year and see if it's working the way we want it to. I don't think it's ready for prime time. I would prefer that we come back and we could look at maybe if Alderman Bray has some concerns that she can produce, some language that we can vote on in some future one motion or the other and that way I can see what we're talking about and understand the implications. I'm with Amelia that we got a concrete and asphalt. It captures everything. I think we're all talking about the same thing, but we can't remember what we did last year. How is the council several years from now going to be able to understand that? They may interpret that differently. I'm comfortable with protections that are in place for that money. I don't buy into the narrative that people can't figure out where the transportation money has gone. We've been crystal clear about that from day one. I'm proud of how we've increased spending across the board on street resurfacing. I know that there are folks that don't like potholes, but we live in Illinois. It freezes and thaws. It's what it does. You can go to Arizona where there are no potholes, but then you got to play the game of, will there be water? And I don't want to play that game. So no sidewalks, cactus, scorpions, tarantulas. It sounds awful. So for me, I'd just like to make a motion that we delay this until the next council meeting with the direction to staff that we have an alternative draft presented. Any further aldermanic comments or questions can be added to another alternative. And then in the memo, to specify some of these questions that we've talked about tonight. So to Alderman Mulwamboy's point about the pavement preservation fund, Karen's concerns, all those just get put in the staff memo so everybody's crystal clear about what it is we're doing, and then it's in writing and there's no question. No one has to watch this conversation at some point in the future.
So you're making that motion? Is there a second to Alderman Black's motion?
A point of order here.
Okay.
I had a motion
Did we have a second to your motion?
I don't think you called for a second to my motion because we were debating that motion. And,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Then that's accurate. Mm-hmm. If you'll restate your motion, and then we'll come back to if it gets a second, we'll be voting on that as opposed to Alderman Black's motion.
Exactly.
But if you'll restate yours.
So I made a motion to pass the Bray draft alternative. This was presented to everyone, including staff, earlier today, following some comments from constituents and others. It takes into consideration the philosophy that we developed while passing the additional 4-cent gas tax, which was that we wanted this money to pay for concrete and asphalt work, not historic preservation, not brick streets, which are known to be very expensive to replace with brick. If we would want to overlay brick with concrete and asphalt, this fund could respond for that. But we specifically said we were passing this gas tax to pay for concrete and asphalt. And so if this council or a council in the future wants to do historic preservations in certain historic neighborhoods, that's a separate initiative. I don't see that as part of the gas tax that we passed. So with that said, the limiting language in the 4th paragraph, the Bray draft, adds in concrete and asphalt street resurfacing programs. So I would advocate that position, and I think that this is, again, represents where we landed with our discussions about the gas tax. And so the motion is that the Bray draft alternative would be the ordinance that would pass, and I look for a second.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Alderman Mulwamboy. Okay. Any further discussion on that? The amendment that made by Alderwoman Bray, seconded by Alderman Mulwamboy. Questions? Specifically.
Go ahead, Amelia, you were first. Go ahead.
I don't think I was. So I'm more than happy. I've already talked once.
Absolutely.
Okay. This is with specific regard to the amendment.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
Correct. Wait.
Specifically,
you mean the motion?
To the motion. I'm sorry. Well,
Okay.
the motion that amends the main motion, or excuse me, the staff motion.
Okay.
I'm not trying to confuse, but I'm succeeding.
Thank you. Okay. No, I simply would disagree with some of the assertions that are being made as in terms of motivations for different individuals for doing certain things, that personal motivations are being attributed to the group as a whole, which I disagree with. And I won't belabor the point, but I think, again, we have streets in the city that desperately need maintenance. They desperately need work. And so to remove them from a funding source, I think, is saying to those residents that we're not taking your needs seriously because your needs are different than some other people's needs. And I would also disagree with any assertions that there's not potentially cost equity. We've looked at those numbers. They tell a very different story depending on how you look at them. And again, I don't think we need to get into the details here this evening, but I think it would be unfortunate to unnecessarily limit our options moving forward when there is great need in the community. And so I don't want to limit our ability to assess those needs as they come to infrastructure. And I think that staff has done a good job of pointing out that this does not require us to pay for any specific type of project. It just narrows what we can pay for. So why artificially narrow it at this point in time? Because council will make those case-by-case policy decisions as things come to it for funding. So I will say that I could agree to the Bray draft. I think there are some good suggestions here. If the language, concrete and asphalt, were removed, and we just talked about street resurfacing, because I think we're all on the same page here. We want this money to go towards street resurfacing and that infrastructure for our streets. Thank you.
Alderwoman Painter.
Okay, thank you. I think that the concern here is that brick streets will be overlooked. And we have a master plan for brick streets. We have agreed to go forward with that. However, we have got such a severe problem with the asphalt and concrete that we have right now, and we have limited funds to spend on that. And I think we need to move ahead with this and figure out how we're going to pay for the brick streets going forward. I disagree that that should be part of this. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further comments, if we will vote on the... Oh. Okay.
Wait. No. Just so I'm clear,
okay.
We're talking about...
We are voting on the...
This document as is, no adjustments.
No. The Bray,
right.
Bray draft.
We
yes,
had
correct.
a lengthy conversation, so what I'm looking at here is what I'm voting on.
The Bray draft alternative.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
So that's the motion that has been made. So if everyone will please vote. Whatever it says. Yes. Whatever you say. Okay. If everyone will go ahead and vote, please. Okay. The motion fails 6-3. There are 3 nays to announce. Madam Clerk, would you read the nays? Excuse me. The
3
motion,
ayes.
Excuse me. There are 6 nays. Okay.
6 nays.
Yes. Thank you.
Alderman Maffey, Alderman Sage, Alderman Burgess, Alderman Painter, Alderman Black, and Alderman Howman.
Okay. Now we go back to the Alderman Black and Painter.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we table this item until the next city council meeting. I think it's the 22nd, and we staff produces a draft alternative based on this conversation. And if Alderman Bray wants to produce another document, we can have those as an option and vote at that point in time. Also with the specification that in the staff executive summary that we answer some of these questions that we've had tonight very specifically and very deliberatively.
As part of the record?
Yes.
Okay. Alderwoman Painter.
I would like to make a motion that...
you made a motion. Okay. Is there I'm sorry, before we go, is there a second? Second by Alderwoman Howman. Any discussion?
Yes. I would like to move this along. I think we've discussed this a lot, and I prefer what Alderman Sage has presented. I think we need to get this done.
Okay. So, if that were the case, then, if I can summarize, you're arguing in favor of voting this down and then just making the changes that Alderman Sage suggested.
Correct.
And acting tonight. Correct. Okay. Alderman Sage, since you've been referred to.
Thank you. So just maybe a question for Tim and for staff. So because I do agree generally overall with the principle of it doesn't serve us well when we're up here trying to work through alternatives in writing before we, as we come to the meeting. So, and that's always been, I think, kind of an overarching principle for me. So I do see some value in what Scott is suggesting, but I want to make sure then that Tim, Billy, Jeff, Jim, that do you have the context or kind of the scope of what it is that we would be looking to have brought back to us on the 22nd for a vote?
I would say no.
Okay.
But what I'm going to do and what staff will do, and we've done it in the past, is we replay council meetings and try to find some clarity and some uniformity in actually what was said. And that's been the approach in the past, and that's what we'll do with delivery on the 22nd.
Yeah, I'm not sure that clarity is going to come from a rerun if it doesn't happen during the original broadcast. So let me ask this: are there some specific gaps that based on kind of the cumulative conversation we've had here tonight, that perhaps we can just take 2 or 3 more minutes and have some conversation here as a council in terms of bringing something back that helps you to bring something back on the 22nd that the council can work with? Or do you just simply need to kind of step away and digest and decide after tonight?
I think what I would appreciate is, we've got staff taking notes, now. We will replay this council meeting. I think, I can decipher, what the majority of the council is looking for. That will be included in a city manager update, and you guys will respond accordingly. And if it makes the April 22nd council agenda, it will. And if there's more work that needs to be done, we'll do it.
Yeah, and Scott, I know that you would agree with this. We're going to do this one way or another on the 22nd. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. At this point, then, if we have the motion made by Alderman Black, if everyone will go ahead and vote on that motion. Yes. Okay. The motion carries 9-0. Okay. All right. And so we're coming back. Stay tuned. Streets and Asphalt 2.0. Okay. We move right along to item 8D, and this is considering a resolution authorizing a bid waiver, and I'm going to turn this over to our city manager, Mr. Gleason. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This item is one that could have gone on consent, but we felt it best to be on the regular agenda. This past March, Council approved an update to the zoning ordinance, and there also was a pledge, very clear direction from Council, that we also look at the R3B portion of our zoning code that we have as a city. With the approval of this, it will employ Haziel Levine in an amount not to exceed $35,000 to look at that portion that was discussed very publicly, I think, in a February public meeting, and then at the council meeting where this was approved last month.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Questions? Alderwoman Schmidt.
Thank you for bringing this back so quickly. I really appreciate how rapidly you addressed this. My understanding was that the issues regarding R3B were specific to the regeneration and preservation neighborhoods that are on the transition areas of the downtown and not to all of the R3B. So I'm a little vague about why this is such a big scope. I'm also not particularly clear about what the end product from Haziel Levine is going to be. It seems to me they're going to look at this and say, we shouldn't have very high density in historic neighborhoods. And then what? So I'd like some clarification on that. And I'd also like to recommend that there be a role here for the Historic Preservation Commission because the issues are specific to preservation neighborhoods and regeneration neighborhoods that are on both the west side and the east side of downtown.
Bob Mart, Community Development Director Bob Mart. Bob, when you get to the podium, just share what you envision the next steps are, because they might already line up with what Alderman Schmidt was saying.
So the intent was to concentrate the study in directly adjacent to the downtown, and you'll see that within the resolution. And it was not to extend outside of those areas that are also zoned R3B throughout the rest of the community. The other effort was that
we are encumbering this balance under this year's budget for use in next year's budget. So we did have that money available to complete the study. The intent of and the recommendation from the Planning Commission was to utilize this money over the next fiscal year, and so we're trying to finalize that commitment. And then your other question was utilizing the Historic Preservation Commission, and I think through this analysis and study there'll be opportunity for both the Preservation Commission, the Planning Commission, and the residents to participate in the process.
Okay. Questions? All right. Is there a motion then? Moved by Alderman Black. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Matthey. Did you also want to speak to that? Okay. All right. If everyone will go ahead and vote. Motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. And we move on to City Manager's comments.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. On the screen is some upcoming events that we have in the community. And I have two additional items. One, I wanted to give credit and very much appreciate the comments publicly and privately to Scott Rathbun as Finance Director, his team that includes Patty Lynn Silva, and then also Chris Tomerlin. This was Scott's first budget. He's been here 3 years, but it's his first budget as the Finance Director. There was a component in bringing me up to speed as the new city manager, and Lord knows I had quite a few questions, and things that I was comparing it to in my experience. So I guess I wanted to take a quick moment to recognize Scott and his team for what I feel is a job well done. I know you guys did, and I very much appreciate that. Last item is Chief Clay Wheeler. He announced his retirement. We've got a few months, but he announced his retirement effective June 21st, and it's something that Clay has very much kept me up to speed on some of the things that are going on in his personal life. So very much appreciate that he has kept me in the loop the entire time. And then also just want to recognize and appreciate the leadership that he's provided for the Bloomington Police Department. Definitely a man of integrity. And, I reluctantly, in my press release, and that's what I said, was I reluctantly accepted his resignation. I'm going to ask Clay, Chief, do you want to come up and make a couple of comments? And then after the Chief's done, I'm actually going to talk about the next steps, the recruitment process for his replacement. Chief?
First off, I just want to say thank you. Several of you reached out to me. And also, just in case anybody's still watching this in the public, I want to tell them it didn't go unnoticed, several of the comments that were made in social media and so forth, offering support, and it was very touching. I wish the timing was better, but like Mr. Gleason told me, the timing is never going to be good for there's always going to be something going on, something I wish I could try to help fix in the community I grew up in. I will say I'm not done yet. I'm here till June 21st. I've got some things I'm still going to try to accomplish, and that will apply to some outreach things I still want to do to try to address some of the violence in teens and just, maybe more long-term things. Maybe because I can't say that I'm going to be able to go out there and stop violence immediately, but I'm going to continue the discussions to try to help people work on things that'll help give teens hope in their life. So we're going to continue to work on providing positive experiences, and I'll be asking the community to do that. And I also publicly want to take this opportunity to say we still have 2 recent murders that are unsolved. And there's no doubt in my mind that there are people out there that know what happened, and I want to plead for them to come forward so that society can say that in our community that's not acceptable, and we want to try to curb that violence. Regardless of whether or not we can put the enclosure on those, during my time here, you have an outstanding police department full of very capable people. They do great investigations. The police officers on the street are committed, dedicated to the community service, and we're going to be off just fine. They will continue to make this one of the best places in the world to raise a family, and I want to make sure that that's true for all our citizens. So, thank you.
Thank you.
And then real quick, Mayor and Council, I've been asked what were the next steps. And what I envision is a nationwide recruitment for the next police chief. I know that there's some internal interest, but we will post this as a nationwide search. Another thing, see no need in using a consultant. This is something that can be conducted internally. We'll pay the couple $100 per to hang our advertisement with like the International Association Chiefs of Police, GovHR is a recruiting firm, just some of those that really truly attract the kind of attention that I believe this position warrants and will attract. And then also, I plan on having this posted sometime in the next couple of weeks. So that's the next steps, very similar to what we did with the deputy city manager recruitment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gleason. And I just wanted again to thank Clay. Very much appreciate what you do and your entire department. I just also, the only announcement that I have is that because it turns out, I found out on Friday that a week from Friday is Good Friday, and so I will not be having the mayor's open house on that particular Friday. We've had about 150 of them so far. I won't be having that one. But if you have other issues, you can obviously always contact me or your alderman beforehand, or if you have questions, before that meeting. That's all I have. Alderman Matthey.
I got two things, Mayor. The first thing I wanted to just point out, and I didn't pull it from the agenda, but under 7P today, we exchanged some licensing requirement around Keg Grove Brewery. And I just wanted to say, I was reading through the packet, and I was really impressed the fact that Keg Grove was able to go out and sit down with the White Place neighborhood and come to a resolution of what was going to work for both entities. And I just thought that was that was something that should be called out of how well that seemed to have worked. I mean, that's what we want, is we want businesses to work with the neighbors that are around them, and it worked. So I wanted to point that out.
And I'll I'll pass that along to the Liquor Commission, because that was the stipulation. We didn't want to be in a situation where we did this he said, she said.
Well, and my first thought,
you're right, it worked.
When I read the headline of what the resolution was, I was like, oh, here comes the emails from the White Place neighborhood. And then I kept reading, and I was like, oh, hey, they already worked it out. Great.
They worked it out, yeah.
So good. The second thing is just I've gotten like 5 calls in the last 2 days as people are out doing spring cleaning, and a lot of people are concerned about leaves that didn't get picked up in the fall because it started snowing like 7 months ago, it feels like, in October, so we didn't get all the leaves off the ground. So I just been telling everybody, just put your leaves out the same as you put out any of the rest of your brush, and we'll come and pick it up. Don't worry about it. But people are really concerned about leaves right now, since we only do that in the fall. And I've just been telling everybody to put it out in the streets. I just wanted to say that if anybody happens to be watching still, put your leaves out. Not in the street, on the curb, on the parkway. I tell everybody not in the street. Yeah.
Okay. We're good. Alderman Black.
Thank you. Just so everybody knows, I will be traveling for work on the 22nd, but I'll be calling in.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to, excuse me, do we have, we don't have an executive session of any form. We're all good. Anything else? Alderwoman Bray, I'm sorry.
I was going to add that next Monday I will also be calling in because I'll be out of town for a funeral.
Oh, okay. Sorry
And
for your
I
loss.
think that qualifies for call-in. Medical condition, business, or death. Does there have to be a particular degree of affinity?
You can certainly call in and listen.
Mhm.
So it's not going to be reactive.
Committee of the whole. Okay, thank you, Jeff.
We're gonna verify that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn? Oof, many of them. Well, made by Alderman Millawamboy, second by Alderman Howman. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Thanks.